First step there, of course, is get an understanding on how do I assess my landscape, what kind of reporting, what kind of policies do I need to take care of. The very first information I can obtain is from SAP itself. They have for each and every product by standard security guide, which already gives a comprehensive information how SAP thinks that their customers should run their systems. I specifically say that in this way because I have seen multiple customers just, let's say, ignoring that kind of information, and simple basics are not taken into account. Within Germany, we have the Federal Office for Information Security, so that's a dedicated unit from the government, and there we have the so-called Grundschutz catalog, which even offers a dedicated SAP module. This is also translated into English, so that would also be available for you as an additional source of information. In the same way, there's a assistance tool which gives you an overview about the top 20 vulnerabilities you do have within ABAP. This is a document we have written and also submitted to the BSI. Then we have the so-called, in German, ERP Prüfleitfaden. So this is the audit guide by the German SAP user group. This was released in 2009 in the first version. There's a second version from 2015. Unfortunately, in order to get the comprehensive view, you need to take both documents into account. So the version 2 already consists of around 180 pages. Then you need to take into account an additional amount of around 50 pages from the version 2009, and then you get the full picture of what the German SAP user group recommends in order to protect your SAP landscape. So that's quite a challenging task to fulfill all these requirements. And looking at the typical SAP landscape from a large customer, you will end up, let's say, somewhere between 5 SAP system lines and maybe up to 150, 200, 250, maybe even 300 system lines, consisting of up to 1,000 SAP systems, what we have seen at customers. So then it's clear that it's not an easy task in order to let's say, analyze the complete landscape just by manual assessment, and it's really, really necessary that you find some sort of automation. So once you start assessing the whole landscape, which brings us to the SAP Secure Operations Map, then you need to get an overview about the different areas. This is what SAP references in their own SAP Security Baseline template. You can access this template, and it's a Word document you can adopt on your own via the OSS note we put into the footer. So within that SAP note, you get a document, you get all the information, what SAP recommends basically in order to set up a secure baseline. I can really, really recommend and really suggest to download that paper to adopt to your landscape if you haven't done so yet. There's a lot of information. You get policies, you get controls, you get tips, what you should check for. If you're not doing anything at all, please download that document and try to adopt within your landscape. Of course, there might always be areas where you do think, okay, we have treated this in a separate way. Then there are always two things to discuss. So what's my baseline document? Do I have my own IT security controls? And do I make a reference to the SAP guidelines and security guides? Or do I incorporate all the information into my documentation and then I have the maintenance overhead? My personal recommendation is whenever you can, please stay and stick with the standard and just mark all exemptions where you do have a different opinion on that topic. So if you do have an auditor, you can always refer to the standard baseline template, and later on you do have a separate document that basically enlists all the derivations and where you made exemptions, gating control that you do have implemented. So let's go into the details of each and every section. That SAP Secure Operations Map is have been there for ages. I think when I personally started SAP Security, and that was 10 years ago, this map has already been more or less in the same version available. Nevertheless, it still gives a comprehensive overview about all the topics you should take care of, and this is where we want to dig into the details. So let's jump into the first area, Patrick.
Yeah, just one remark. Of course, we will also not only highlight the OSS note in the footer, we will also link or provide a link to it so you can actually use the webinar slides, which we will make available later on, to directly go into the OSS note in question.
Okay, so let's go into the first area of security compliance. Of course, this consists on one hand of setting up a governance. Hopefully you do have somehow already a governance in place, or someone is responsible. Of course, you should have someone who is defining all the policies, and then you should have someone who is responsible for operations, and hopefully the one who is responsible for operations is also responsible for security. Otherwise, it's very likely that you do end up in a situation that different people point at each other, and it's always a question of how much power does the security governance have. In the end, for your company, my personal approach is you should have a risk-based approach whenever you do set up your security requirements, and also when you talk about necessary mitigations. In order to understand and get the overview, we talked initially about the so-called assess phase or monitor phase. SAP calls this more or less audit. So you need to have an understanding what are your policies, what are your vulnerabilities, and you should cover this on all areas and on all layers. So going from the network up the operating system level, database level, interface level, application, configuration, users and authorizations, all these parts should be taken into account when getting an overview about the security state of your landscape. Within that, we have maybe even two different areas. So we have one area that goes in the area of prevention, and we have one area that is detection. So prevention is everything that is related to avoiding any security information weakness. Let's call it a weakness in case you do have a vulnerability that has not yet been exploited. And of course, there are also things you can consider in order to have something that detects once a compromise has been happened. So for that, you need a logging infrastructure and a security incident event management system. For cloud security, that's one of the really tough challenges at the moment. SAP is doing really a good job there and offering lots of cloud services. We do see many customers running now in a hybrid scenario, having different systems in an on-prem, various applications outside to SAP, and in between you do have connection. Which essentially means that one of your SAP systems as of today might tomorrow end up being in the cloud. And it's not always the case that these systems are already prepared to be in the cloud. And even the concepts when they were designed like 20 years ago or they have been set up like 10 years ago, they're just not prepared. So this is something you do want to take into account. And of course, in the same way, once you go into the cloud, you need to have a secure architecture. That's always one of the important requirements. Start as early as possible and get an understanding and ensure that you build security by design. Also, one of the challenging tasks I do see is security are the SLAs. And also in comparison to the security requirements, many of the cloud providers do only offer 99.5% of guaranteed uptime, and they even reduce that amount by scheduled maintenance windows. And sometimes it also happens if you look very carefully into the contracts that you do see in case of there is a violation, all that happens is that the amount of money you pay per month or for that specific month is reduced. This typically will not cover your expenses, so go look into that section once you go into the cloud and make an, or plan for going into the cloud. Goes often wrong, what I can say from my perspective. Emergency concept, I guess that's a no-brainer. You should have one because once you need it, you will be really happy that you do have one. Still, just as a reminder, it's not necessary that each and every SAP emergency user does have SAP all by default. However, this is still the 95% case we do see at our customers who have implemented emergency concept that once you have a firefighter user or something like that, you always end up with all the authorizations. You should also limit that from our perspective. Which brings us to the next area, secure operations. So that consists of user and authorizations, authentication and single sign-on, support security, security review and monitoring. Users and authorizations, this is a topic everyone knows. The type of SOD and properly maintaining critical authorizations and role assignments, all those topics have been there for years, and I think even everyone who started with 4.6c or even earlier, like in the 90s or in the early in the 80s with the R2 system or then with the R3 system, they already had standard users in their scope. However, user provisioning and user deprovisioning is a challenging task. Very frequently and very often we do see that this is not properly handled. So on a process level, you want to look into that, and you should also make sure that you do secure all critical administration authorizations. This is also something that specifically for all the technical users very, very often goes wrong. RSC authorizations is just such a typical example where we very frequently see that technical users run on a near SAP all profile. However, in reality, there should, and everyone writes in their documentation, there should be at least privilege principle enforced, but in reality, that's rarely adopted. Authentication is really a plus from my perspective. Here you can really do something which also all your users can have a benefit from. So single sign-on is typically here just a good example where you can remove or reduce the amount for the user to work with the SAP system to log on, reduce all those password complexities. Everyone knows there's many people, some even if you have a very strict policy, start writing down their passwords. So using single sign-on, you have an effective mechanism in order to bypass this. Of course, once you set that up, you want to make sure that encryption is also set up in a secure manner. For review and monitoring, one of the things I see very frequently, SAP does not deliver the security audit log turned on by default. So customers do need to activate this, which results, unfortunately, sometimes in the situation that we do get into a forensic investigation and we are not able to get the full picture because not every log file is available or has been turned on. So step one is, of course, security audit log. The name itself for someone who is security interested says itself, this is meant to be turned on. And once you turn it on, please make sure that you also cover all critical events. That's the second step. It does not help if you turn it on, but you do not set an appropriate filter because then you need to also configure what kind of events you do want to have in that log. Really recommended is also to have a central log monitoring and to correlate all those logs. So with the security incident event management system, and you should have also a corresponding team or process or someone who is really looking at that data. It's kind of comparable to web application firewalls. We have in PCI compliance the requirement to have a web application firewall. As a result, I have seen that people just bought, for compliance reason, the web application firewall, put it into the rack. You had a green LED blinking on the machine, and that's it. So that's not beneficial at all, and you spend a lot of money. So once you buy any additional software or solution, you do want to make sure that you do have the corresponding processes and personnel who really work with the stuff and who also know to work with the applications. Also, as a reminder, remember those 146 days. One of the examples earlier presented by Patrick was a customer web portal that was compromised, and we were not able to really get the full picture on how the attack happened. Unfortunately, this was a system that hasn't been patched for 3 years, so out of the box there were multiple ways how you could easily compromise the system. So from that perspective, it's really rather more a discussion once you run into that situation. What are you going to do? Are you going to shut down your system? Think about your let's say Apple, and the App Store would go down for 1 hour. How much money is lost during that time because people who would just buy in that specific moment in time an application where Apple then makes revenue, and then they just don't buy it. I have no idea what's the amount, but I assume it's a significant amount. So let's go into the next area, which would be secure setup. Hardening operating systems. We very frequently hear in Germany. I know hardening the operating system is a very German translation. As I'm German, I think I'm allowed to say that. It's not meant in an inappropriate way. What I do mean is take care of your secure configuration. So please regularly check all the systems, and please check that ideally in an automated manner. It does not help if you check once a year or let's say every 3 years. This is really something that should be taken into account every day, so that you do get a direct information once you do have a misconfiguration. Simple example for everyone who is related to basis and who has already been conducting on a technical way audits in the SAP landscape. We do have the profile lock and no automatic user sub-star, which basically is like an emergency access to the system. You do need that after a client copy in order to access the new client with a standard user sub-star and a standard password pass. So what we do see is that people make the client copy and then forget to revert the parameter. So the system remains in an insecure state, and an attacker could potentially log on with a standard user and sub all privileges. Communication security is the next area. You should have an overview which system is communicating with whom, and the earlier you start getting an overview, the better it is. I have seen customers having just 15,000 RSC connections with technical users across their whole landscape. You cannot audit that by hand, and there were very surprising things within these connections which resulted in the fact that once you compromise one of the production systems or even some of the development systems, you could end up with an administrative user in all the systems just by the vast amount of authorizations that had been assigned to those technical users running on those connections. Once you set up a connection, especially if there are untrusted networks involved, please make sure that you do also use encryption. SNC is really a topic that has been there for years. It's getting easier and easier. I think for HTTPS, this is somewhat everyone knows. You would not even consider using online banking on an unencrypted web server. So then my question is, why do people run their SAP systems without encryption? Especially if there are untrusted networks involved. And one of the things that is also important is get an understanding about the data you possess, where are your assets, because this also determines on how many and how hard your security requirements will be. So once you classify your data and you know where your assets are, your crown jewels within the SAP system, then you get an understanding what will be the impact of a breach, and is the amount of money I invest on that system in order to secure it, is it really worth it? Because it doesn't make sense to spend like hundreds of thousands of dollars for systems where there's not any confidential data stored inside. And of course, you should have some process that ensures that you do scan for malware. Honestly, this is more like a compliance part for me, because typically this is controlled with the client. So as long as you do have somewhere running one antivirus engine, that's the first step. Then I'm already happy from my perspective. I don't want you to spend a ridiculous large amount of money into a virus scan solution for something that is then scanning for malware that is not specifically designed for SAP systems and cannot compromise your SAP system. That's something from my personal experience. But of course, for compliance reasons, please make sure that you do have somewhere antivirus in place. So if your clients do not have any antivirus in place, then make sure that the servers are properly protected. Which brings us to the so-called secure code area. For secure code, this is something which is kind of the mother of all security vulnerabilities, because every vulnerability you do have, if it's in your operating system or if it's within the SAP standard, in the end, that's related somehow to a software vulnerability. In most of the cases, because within SAP, we do not too frequently deal with hardware security. The software vendors like SAP take care on their own that they do ensure that their standard code is properly secured. Remember the amount of security patches that has been released by SAP that tremendously increased in 2009. We can say that by that time, SAP used our code profiler to scan the whole SAP standard, and that was also one of the reasons why there were such a vast amount of findings by that time that had been released. For you need to take care on your custom code. So whatever you develop on your own, you need to take into account security. So an attacker just needs to find one bug within your landscape and he can easily compromise the whole landscape. So one ABAP command injection is for me sufficient to compromise your whole system, and most likely just due to the interfaces and the connections between the system, it is very likely that afterwards you can also pivot to other systems and compromise these as well. So please make sure that you do scan your custom code and do also scan the code from your third-party vendors. This is often overseen, especially we do find lots of migration code, and in migration code you find all those dirty hacks and nasty programs to just deal with maybe existing issues during the migration, and very often these are forgotten on the systems. So please make sure that you do set up secure software development lifecycle. That's a topic that has been also for years at the RSA conference, so it's not a new topic. Of course, please do this always on a risk-based remediation approach. I don't want you to fix all 3 million vulnerabilities you do have, but you should focus on these that are really the important ones. That also depends on how high you set your security level or your necessary security bar, how much protection you do need to achieve. So if you're in a production business, you might have different requirements than someone in the government area, in the defense area, or in the financial services area. Which brings us to the next area, that's infrastructure security. So this covers network security, where I have already talked about web application firewalls. Please make sure that you do have a firewall in front of your SAP system. I cannot repeat how much attack surface this can easily reduce on your SAP system. If you install an SAP system, you have like 25 different ports open, and lots of these are just related to administrative usage. In the end, for the end users, you just need 4 ports. So please make sure that you do have a firewall in front of all your SAP systems, and that you do allow for all your standard users just access to the end users ports. It so tremendously reduces the attack surface of your SAP systems. It's really a great invest. Use encryption, use a reverse proxy. This is also something SAP recommends. At least please use that in an internet scenario. Please make sure that you do have a web application firewall once you expose your SAP system to the internet. For the operating system and the database, restrict access, restrict folder permissions. Please make sure that you do not have unnecessary services, that you do not have any guest users. And one point that is very frequently also overlooked is the gateway security itself. Gateway security has been known since 2007. It basically allows remote code execution, a complete system compromise at the push of a keyboard button. Super simple to exploit, can be exploited using the SAP standard, and the standard recommendation to fix this is just to reduce the attack surface from remote to local. So once a standard user has access to the SAP system but does not have authorizations like in the SAP administration group, this will still be sufficient to completely compromise your system. And this is frequently in pen test scenarios seen where you do have technical users, where you have a file transfer interface, and these users have shell access. So please look for these as well. In the same way, you do want to protect your database. You do want to have unnecessary databases running on the SAP system. I haven't seen that too often, but sometimes it happens for interface reasons. And please also make sure that you do not have unnecessary users and that you also enforce the security guidelines of your database vendor. In the same way, also take care about your front end. So this relies to either the browser, the NetWeaver business client, or the sub GUI. The sub GUI after installation is really like one gigabyte of binaries that is stored on your client machine if you do install it in the complete way. So that basically means it has a large attack surface, and just recently in the latest security patches there has been once again a way found how you can compromise systems with an outdated sub GUI. So then there's the last area that we put on top from our perspective, that's secure change management. This is also necessary from our point of view. For that we added 2 additional boxes that do relate to transport security and the change management processes. So for transport security, this basically means everything where you do ship software from dev to qual, from qual to prod, or from an external system into your system. Please make sure that you do protect the transports, that you do check for security vulnerabilities, and please also make sure that the interfaces are properly protected. In the same way goes change management, ISO 27001. There's a dedicated control for it. I don't want to be now here, let's say, the paper pen tester who just refers to all those controls, but it's really necessary to have a proper tracking about your changes in your landscape. Most customers already implement this somehow. And so this is also important from a security point of view, because if you do not have your changes under control, you will most likely also not have your security under control. And once you make a security relevant change, you do want to have the proper auditability about that. For that, it's also necessary to really understand your business requirements and to correlate them with the corresponding security requirements. And one of the central systems you need to use most likely will be the solution manager. Especially the change management work center does help you. And if you do not have system recommendations set up across your landscape, maybe because some of the systems are not being able to be connected to the latest solution manager, then I can tell you that you do not have patch management under control, because this is a prerequisite that you are able to apply all the security patches in a meaningful way and that you are able to control this across your landscape. Which brings us to the end. So maybe we just skip that screen and go to the next slide, Patrick. I just want to give you a short overview about our portfolio. So we do have professional services that are represented by my team and the Pentest group. We can help you with establishing a security baseline. We can adopt, we can analyze for you that the appropriate controls are taken into account. We can help you with mitigation, with cleanup. We do have a partnership together with SAP for setting up enterprise threat detection, and we have also the possibility to provide you an offer for fixing coding issues with a fixed effort and fixed price tag. So if you have this and that amount of other vulnerabilities, we can give you a very specific offer on that. You can use our cloud solutions in order to scan your ABAP code as an example. We do have Transport Profiler who can help you to validate all those SAP transports also in advance. So you can check transports prior to put them into the queue and install them in your SAP system and already see if these would in any way harm your SAP system. Second product is Code Profiler, which is static code analysis for ABAP and also for HANA. So we have Code Profiler for HANA and Code Profiler for ABAP. Both can be integrated into the development environment, and you can very easily automatically enforce a secure software development lifecycle. And we really want to assist here the developers that they can produce more efficient, more stable, more reliable, and more secure code. Third product is System Profiler, where Code Profiler targets all the developers. System Profiler aims at SAP basis. So this is a solution that helps SAP basis in order to securely configure and monitor all security relevant settings across the whole SAP landscape, and this also covers authorizations. All these can report to our reporting solutions in case you do need a nice overview for your management. And then we do have dedicated add-ons for various scenarios. Sometimes we do use these with our professional services. Sometimes these correlate to existing products. Which brings me to the end, Patrick. I really thank you for taking the extra time and staying here with me, and I think on that note we could open the line for questions.
Yes, thanks Fred, and there have been 2 questions already. The first one is whether there's a good antivirus solution with a focus on SAP.
Yeah, okay, so you that's a good question. So my personal honest answer, yeah, there are solutions. Yes, they will check for standard vulnerabilities. I'm not aware about any solution that is really specific to SAP threats. For me, what I see often from a compliance perspective is that in e-recruiting scenario, people are required to use antivirus scans. However, you need to understand how you can work with e-recruiting. So very frequently, all the data will be anyhow already transformed into a PDF-A standard, which is just removing all coding possibilities and embedded execution of code. So my honest answer is no, I cannot recommend any of them. That was said in a wrong way. I cannot recommend a specific product. I can recommend using one in case it's necessary for you. But from my perspective, my personal perspective, I do really see that many customers don't even have the security settings, the patch management in control across the landscape. So if you do have standard vulnerabilities within your SAP system where a penetration tester would gain access to your landscape within one day, easily, I would not spend too much money on antivirus. Yeah, especially in the situation when you do have antivirus already on your client. So typically this is not targeting the SAP landscape, and typically this is targeting the Windows client. So yeah. As long as these are protected, I'm happy.
In general, I think or a specific antivirus for SAP is not really a necessity. I agree with Fred. However, SAP does have a virus scan interface, but that, as Fred also already mentioned, is only for making sure that the documents contained in SAP will not affect the clients eventually. The next question.
In most situations, so just to hook, in most situations. Of course, I'm here now the security guy and everyone will be confused. What, he's not recommending antivirus? This is not what I said. It's just like I would like to put your focus on different areas than the antivirus solution, because this is typically something that has been known since the 90s. And I do see that this is typically in control on all the clients and is already properly rolled out. So unless there is a specific requirement for really going for a second layer of antivirus solution, in that case, then I don't see any necessity for the additional license cost. Yep.
We have an additional question, which is probably a little, I'll just ask a question. A similar question for Seam, actually. Is there a Seam system which includes a specific checks for SAP?
Yes, and that is enterprise threat detection. So this is developed by SAP. It's available for since two years roughly. So it is getting in the same way like we very often see SAP products, and I'm here now the one on the independent side. Yes, if you do have a young product, you have sometimes issues. I think we are past those initial hard challenges, and that's the solution I would recommend to use.
There's a direct question coming in. It was Chris Walters who was asking, and he was asking for something next to ETD. What I can say from our perspective as well is there's always a difference, I would say, between a SIEM system and a vulnerability analyzer. So ETD is, I think, one of the only, if not the only, SIEM system, so to speak, which is targeting SAP with a main priority almost solely. However, if you do want to feed an existing SIEM system, such as Splunk or QRadar or ArcSight, with data from SAP, we also have System Profiler, and System Profiler can connect to any SIEM system out there by providing standard formats. So I think this is probably your best option if you want to have a SIEM system connected to your SAP system.
Yeah, this also relates, like what I said earlier, to prevent and detect. So SIEM is of course, SIEM systems are related to detect an attack. With System Profiler, we can give you information about insecure configuration issues, which you then later on take into account. One of the great examples I typically have is if you do see a log onto your SAP system, and that's, let's say, a standard user, then it's a difference whether that standard user has also a standard password or not. In the latter case, you really want to know that.
Okay, these are the questions which have come in. So with that, and also looking at the time, thanks everyone for bearing with us. We're 6 minutes overdue. If you do have any more questions, feel free to drop us an email or a call or contact us at some other way, just to show up the contact information we have. Thank you for attending the webinar. Thank you for taking the time. Looking forward to seeing you at one of the next webinars, and hope you enjoyed the time and we could show you something interesting. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye.